Good afternoon, everyone. So I am so delighted to see you all here. We're waiting for at least one more panelist, but in the meantime, I'd like to welcome you all to our next conversation, The Future is Now, How to Unlock Young Farmers' Potential for Sustainable Future Food Systems. And I want to give a huge shout out to the World Farmers Organization for coordinating today's event and bringing me in as moderator. And also a big thanks to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the CG Center. So I am Danny Nierenberg. I am co-founder and president of an organization called Food Tank. We are a nonprofit really devoted to telling stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems across the globe to really motivate, inspire, and activate businesses, farmers, policymakers, foundations, and others to make positive change in our food systems. I'm really, really excited about today's panel. You wouldn't know it by the looks of it right now, but it'll change in a few minutes. That it's really about unlocking the potential that youth have for changing our food systems. And working in ways that include young farmers and advocates and activists and others who are changing policy at both the national and international level. And to make sure that young people are really working in ways that support agriculture and our food systems as one of the solutions to the climate crisis. Unfortunately, in rich and poor countries alike, youth face a lot of challenges, including access to education, information, financial and banking services, and just the things that would help them become better farmers, including mentorship as farming populations age across the globe. So the questions we'll be addressing today focus on how to really ensure that young people have the access to the resources they need to be successful in our food and agriculture systems. And we have an incredible group of panelists, so let me just introduce them briefly. And before I do, I want to remind you all that because of the great activism taking place next door, that you have to hold the mic really close to your mouth, and you'll be passing the mic. So first, I'd like to introduce Roy Steiner, the Senior Vice President for the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. Give Roy a round of applause, please. We have Arnold Puech-Delasac, the President of the World Farmers Organization. Round of applause, please. I'm really delighted that we have Khushbu Suraj, a representative with the World Farmers Organization as well. Thank you for being here. Round of applause. And we have Dr. Mark Smith, the Senior Director of Water Systems and Director of the International Water Management Institute with the CG system. So thank you for being here. We're waiting for a few other folks to ask a round of applause, and hopefully I can introduce them as they come on stage. So, Khushbu, I want to talk to you a little bit about how, and maybe Arnold, you can jump in, how the World Farmers Organization, I've been to one of your conferences in the past and found it very centered on farmers, which was delightful, but not a lot of young people there, and I'm wondering how that's changing now. So Khushbu, I wonder if you can address that first, how the World Farmers Organization is bringing in more youth voices.
Yeah, testing. Okay, it's good. Okay, so I would say that I got the opportunity as one of the young farmers leaders to be enrolled in the second edition of the World Farmers Organization Gymnasium program. And everyone may be wondering, what is gymnasium? Gymnasium is a gym that muscle your leadership skills. That is why we call it the gymnasium. So this is one of the initiative, I would say incredible initiative of the World Farmers Organization that has been brought through the gymnasium platform to enrich our youth as with leadership skills, I would say, because we young farmers, we need to be equipped with leadership qualities in order to really make a difference. We are not only meant to be on the production side, but we are also capable of advocacy and also to make a difference in the agricultural sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll come back to those points about you're not just producers, you're doing all of these other activities as well that are very important. Arnold, I'd really love to hear from you why bringing in youth voices and making sure that they have the resources and education and leadership skills they need was important to the organization.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for your invitation. I have the impress to be 22 years younger when I was the chairman of the Young Farmers in Europe. And it's really a luck that I have had in the past to learn, to be trained by my experience as a young activist in favor of the young farmers. And I have discovered since that time and already at this time that this change was a change for me, but not equally shared into the world. That's why I'm very glad with the board of WFO to have a real program to extend this opportunity to a lot of young farmers into the world. That's why we create 4 years ago or 5 years ago already at the gymnasium, and today, just 1 hour before, we launch our third call of project for joining our next gymnasium. If you are young farmers, if you are close to WFO, if you are not close to WFO, we will find the means to introduce you and to give you the opportunity to join this training.
Can you tell people where to find more information about you who are listening online?
Exactly, you can find that online. We have good services. We are based in Roma, but with now everybody is aware that we can know what's happened at the opposite on the globe.
Thank you so much, Arnold. Roy, obviously this kind of change in how organizations are viewing youth takes investment, and some of that needs to come from the philanthropic world. And Rockefeller has invested a lot in how youth are involved. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, from your experience, why youth are so central to these conversations, but why now they're only being brought to the table and to discussions like these.
It's a great question, Danny. Well, first I want to just say I'm the least qualified person to be talking about this on stage. You know, an older white guy, and I do have 4 young people as children, so that's helpful. But it is really quite daunting how neglected young people are and as everybody knows, we have this incredible aging population of farmers everywhere in the world. Africa, etc., and agriculture and food systems are not appealing to large numbers of them. We're not attracting them because of all the barriers that are in place. I was at a recent conference. There was about 150 farmers, and we asked, how many of you are passing your farms on to your children? Out of 150, it was 2. I mean, that's a very shocking and disturbing. The reason I think we need the young people is because the food system needs to be completely reimagined in multiple dimensions. The Rockefeller Foundation launched about just before COVID a food system vision prize, which was, how do you envision the future of food systems 20 or 30 years from now? And the most dynamic solutions, the most dynamic people submitting solutions were young groups of young people, because they can reimagine things that we have just taken as normal. And if we don't bring that dynamism, that kind of innovation into the food systems, we're going to continue having the value-destroying food system that we currently have. So I'll stop there. Lots more to say, but I'll pass it back to you, Danny.
Thank you, and such great points about how we need to reimagine a more hopeful food system future, and that does take new blood. It takes new ideas from youth, and not just in the farming sector, but also those who are advocates and activists, like those we're hearing over here, which is so great. So Mark, I'm wondering if you can talk from your experience working in water management and trying to preserve our water resources, why youth are so integral to that, to our worsening water situation, unfortunately, right now. How can youth, how are you seeing youth that you work with be a part of the solution?
Sure, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here, enjoying this session. Be able to speak in the Food and Ag Pavilion. I'm spending most of my time over in the Water Pavilion, so I'm very happy to come and water this pavilion a little bit. One of the key things, so I work in the middle of the water system. And we work at the interface between the water system and the food system. And one of the things that we're trying to get across is that because of climate change, the water system is changing fundamentally. As climate change unfolds, and all the evidence points to this, the hydrological cycle is intensifying, and that means more extremes. It means more floods and more droughts. It means that our past experience with water no longer applies to the future. So we need different approaches for the future of water management. We're going to need different people and different institutions that drive change in the water system as we go into the future. And so that's where youth come in. Because as these changes unfold, of course, the people that will lead the action and the implementation of the changes that are needed to make our water systems resilient to future climate change will be young people. They'll be leading this process as we go forward. And given that most of the water used in the world is used by agriculture, then young farmers are at the core of that challenge. And we need to make sure we can, as I think the title says, unlock the pathways that will bring young farmers into the process of rethinking, reimagining the way we manage water systems in agriculture and beyond.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much. I want to introduce our remaining panelists, so I'm so glad that you were both able to make it. Thank you so much. So we have Gia Bastida, who was raised as part of the Otomi Toltec indigenous community. She's a youth activist and the co-founder of the Re-Earth Initiative. A round of applause, please, for Gia. I'm also excited that we're joined by Alicia Siddiqa, a climate justice youth advocate and the co-founder of Polluters Out. Round of applause for Aisha, please. Wonderful. So I'm delighted to bring you both into the conversation. So thank you again for making it over here. I know it's very difficult to make your way through the pavilions. So Gia, right? May I start with you? I'm wondering if you can talk about how your tribe is helping ensure the next generation of farmers have the resources and the investment that they need, because they've been ignored for a very long time by traditional institutions, and that they need the investment that a lot of the big farmers are getting right now.
Hello everyone. It's really an honor to be here, and we apologize for being late. We were at a meeting with the Vice President of Colombia, who has championed a lot of policy in Colombia, so we just ran a little longer, but grateful to be here. And in Mexico, we are not called tribes, we're called ejidos. So it's another form of land ownership, of communal land ownership. And the issue sometimes, the legal issues with communal land ownership is that for any decision to be made, you need the sign-on of the full community, but also individual people can be targeted to sell big pieces of land, and this includes agricultural land. So we have a lot of issues in terms of people being silent and taken away from community. So community building is actually one of the most important assets to make sure that knowledge is passed down, to ensure that knowledge is kept. And another important thing that we've been dealing with for a long time in Mexico in my hometown, has been Mexico has been extracting the water from our aquifer, making it so that our ecosystem was completely transformed. So we used to be dependent on water, and we were a fishing community, and we had tule, which is this plant that you can grow and weave, and that was our economy. Our economy was from the water. And once that was taken away, the culture was taken away, so we had to adapt the culture. And now we make furniture. Isn't that so bizarre, to go from weaving to making furniture? And then obviously we have a lot of maize, but it's not growing like it used to. When I was younger, the maize would grow this high, so high my notebook fell down. And now it grows about this high. And my mom has always told me that's because we are in the most severe drought that Mexico has experienced in 70 years. And that are the things that we are dealing with. The change, the impact in culture, the impact in our ecosystems, the impact on our food systems. And all of that requires what we've been talking a lot about, which is the adaptation conversation. Because if there is no funding for adaptation, then there needs to be financing for loss and damage. But we don't want to get to a point where we lose everything. We don't want to get to a point where our aquifer is completely depleted. We want to get to a point where we can adapt to these changes and mitigate these changes to ensure that our soil is, so many people here can talk about soil, but it's healthy and alive. And we don't want monocrops in our community. And the biodiversity that comes from indigenous communities of not having monocrops has to be passed down and preserved. Now we call it fancy names like regenerative agriculture, but it's really just a way of living that ensures diversity of intake of food. I don't know if that answered your question too well, but the point is to say we have to preserve our original ways of knowing and of growing and spread these, because that's the only thing that's going to heal the land. It's the only thing that's going to let us adapt to these changing climates and the extractivism of water that's happening in a lot of our communities.
And I think it's so important what you had to say about community building to help preserve your culture, have a diversity of not only foods that you're growing, but a diversity of people. That's something I want to get back to later. So, Aisha, I'm wondering, that idea of community is really important for building advocacy around the climate crisis, around our food crisis, around our biodiversity loss crisis, all of the water crisis, all of these things that are facing us right now. And I'm wondering how you, as an advocate, an activist in this realm, really build that community.
Is this on? Okay. So I refer to community in the way that I was raised. Children in my tribe, we do call them tribes where I come from, don't go to school until they are a good 6 years old, and their initial schooling is with their mothers and their grandmothers and their parents. My grandmother brought me with her when she went to collect the medicine. My mother brought me with her when she went to work. We are there learning aside them as equals, even when we are toddlers. And that is my first instance of community. And the second is that my concept of community is much beyond our human relatives. My family is located in an area called Mochiwala at the intersection of two rivers in northern Pakistan, the Chenab River and the Jhelum River. And we're situated at the eye of the river. And I just lost my train of thought. Not just humans, right. Because we are situated at the eye of the river, we consider the river our relative. And the reason why this is important is because my grandfather, his job until he was 60 years old was to actually give water the rite of passage. And how that manifested was when we had too much water, he would carve streams so that there were mechanisms for us to get that water. And when the river got dry, he would close up the streams. And this was not a paid job, but the way that we were sustaining ourselves was that was my grandfather's task. That was the rent he paid to be living on that land. And then the communities and other people in my community were doing other things, turning the soil, keeping it alive. And that kind of lifestyle is slow. Agrarian lifestyles, pastoral lifestyles, farming lifestyles are slow. But because they are slow, that is what we learn from. Everything that nature has, everything that survives, actually takes so much time. And like I was saying, the river, we consider the river as our relative, but in that same way, when our communities are polluted, when there is coal coming into our water, when there are toxins in our water, because 40% of water in Pakistan actually comes from groundwater, the same way nature hurts, we hurt. So the same way that the soil is polluted, the toxins go in our bloodstream. And I've lost family members. My grandparents both died because of water pollution. I lost cousins because of water pollution. And our way of life is at danger. But at the same time, our responsibility and the fact that we've kept this way of life alive is a lesson of resilience. But there is so much that we can learn from the people who have kept the earth alive after multiple extinctions.
Absolutely, and I love that you referred to how you were learning as equals with your elders, and I think we definitely need more of that for young people right now. Mark, I want to come back to you because we've been hearing about this thread of water throughout the conversation and how when water resources are threatened, it threatens culture, it threatens communities, it threatens access to safe and nutritious, really, nutrient-dense food, and it makes the lives of farmers all the more, difficult. How do we address that? Now we have a lot of youth on stage. What do you say to them as somebody who's working for the International Water Management Institute? How can your organization be part of the solution?
Thank you. I suppose there's maybe two key places to start. One is with the immediate challenges around managing water. There are low-hanging fruit. There are low-hanging fruit around how you use water in farming systems, how you manage your irrigation systems, how you get more out of farming systems with less water. But there's a bigger set of issues at stake as well, because if I look at the IPCC report from earlier this year, one of the scenarios it paints is that as we go into this the future and the changing water systems, we will see an increased demand for irrigation water. And the report says that's going to lead to an increase in demand of 2 to 3 times. And I think the examples that we've heard about the aquifer, the river, the pollution of water, leads us, that's a really hair-raising projection. So now we're to be resilient to the changes that are coming down the pipe in farming systems because of impacts on water. We're going to increase withdrawals of water by 2 to 3 times. It's not going to happen, right? So there's another set of projections that say, actually, if we're going to manage to achieve a future in which we live within planetary boundaries, then globally, in a certain scenario, you have to reduce water use in agriculture worldwide by 7%, was the number in this analysis. So how do we cope with those two really divergent futures? And farmers are at the center of that, and young farmers are at the center of creating that future. So in my institute, the International Water Management Institute, we have an initiative that we've launched called the Transformative Futures for Water Security Initiative. And it's leading up to the 2023 UN Water Conference, which takes place next March. And we're running a series of dialogues across multiple stakeholders, but using a concept of what we call youth co-guardianship. So we're convening a process directly alongside youth and youth networks to create a set of what we call missions. So what should be the missions for the future of water, for big, high ambition, game-changing processes for creating this new water future. And we're running that over the coming couple of months leading into, and then we'll take these missions and the coalitions that will be built through this process, we'll take those missions into that UN 2023 Water Conference. And we need you all to come with us and deliver that ambition into that UN conference that will take place next year.
Mark, now I want to turn back to Arnold and Khushbu, because if Mark says that farmers are at the center of how to conserve and protect and find ways to mitigate our water crisis, then how is the World Farmers Organization sort of addressing that? You can go first, Arnold, if you like. We'll let an older person go first.
She will conclude. Yesterday, I have the pleasure to meet the World Economic Forum, and they have created a platform for their young entrepreneur. And now they have 40,000 people, 40,000 young entrepreneurs who are members of their platform. And I am sure that in the rural area, for the farmer, we can do the same. It can be a wonderful goal for us. We have not the same thinking than the World Economic Forum, of course, because we have the land, we have the, as I say always, we have always the earth under our nails, and it's something that we have that in the nose, we have that between the feet when you work outside with all the dust, and we have this sensibility, this attachment to the land, with so huge. And I am sure that with the platform that all the mobile that everybody have now in his pocket, we are able to exchange more, to see more new example, and to be aware that with the global information that everybody have, how to act locally and how to challenge between young organization and young farmers. It's the objective we had with this platform.
Great, thank you so much, Arnold. Khushbu. Pass that mic, please. Thank you.
So to add up to what the President, Mr. Arnold, has said, I would like to highlight that if we are talking about youth and climate crisis, so it is important to know that at WFO there is the Climakers platform. The Climakers is farmers-driven climate change agenda that was adopted by the WFO General Assembly in 2018 and launched at the UNFCCC COP24 in Poland to strengthen the young farmers' position and also other farmers' position in global political discussions on climate change, so by promoting the solutions and best practices that they are already implementing at farm level to adapt to and mitigate climate change. So it's good to know that since 2018, almost 100 farmers' best practices from all over the world have been collected. And since we are focusing on the youth, I would also like to seize this occasion to highlight that the Climakers Africa workshop was organized by the PAFO organization, and there were many themes that were discussed in context of the climate change, and it is about the poly crisis that we have all been talking since the COP has started, about COVID-19, climate change, you have the war, the cost of living is increasing, but of course this is going to impact the youth involvement in agriculture. So these are the challenges that we as youth, and myself, I'm representing the African youth especially, in accessing the essential resources like land and finance. So I would not like to contemplate only on the challenges, but I think we need to shift towards solutions as well. And from the international platform organized by PAFO, the International Youth Summit more specifically, so all the African young farmers gathered and provided like a consensus on the solutions that we are needing. So first, I think we can all agree, be it even if we are of different cultural, geographical positions. So we need, as young farmers, to be part of policy discussions. So it would have been better, like if we could have like more of a policymakers at the table with the youth, like to discuss. At national level, we are already doing it, taking the policymakers in our dialogue, because it is very important that whenever we are like sitting here together discussing, to have the government, a representative of the government, to make sure that our voices are being heard. So that is an initiative, work that is being done. Yeah. And I also want to add up, the young farmers, we are talking about funding. But we all know, as a matter of fact, when we are going to say finance, funding, they are going to say, the policymakers will say, oh, yeah, so they are always needing money. But what if we try to ask that funding in another way? Like, provide us with schemes, provide us with in-kind solutions, be it equipment or subsidies, not funding directly if they cannot do so, but let us change the way that we are asking for money specifically. So that was the discussion. And also, I would say, in terms of innovation and technology, yes, we need the innovation to be more accessible to us, the technology. So these are the discussions that have been taking place at the International Youth Summit, and I wanted to share with you the point of view of the African young farmers. Thank you.
Much, a lot to unpack there. So give me a minute to sort of ask my next question, because I think you bring up such a good point about investment and financing. And so Roy and Shia and Aisha, I'm wondering if we can talk about how that actually looks when we're talking about investing in young people, what it looks like on the ground, and how it can change, as Khushbu referred to. Like, it can be very different than it is now, but young people are not getting the funding. It's old white men who are still getting the funding, even in 2022. And not white women, but especially not youth. And so that really needs to change. And I'm wondering, in your communities, what's your sort of dream scenario of what funding and investment and finance can look like?
Well, this is a very prominent question, especially now that we're talking so much about finance for the Global South and the $100 billion dollars a year commitment. Because if this money comes and it stays at the top, if it stays in the financial institutions, and if it stays in the government, and it gets invested into something that doesn't make it to the ground, we just won't see change happen. We won't see communities protected. And communities of color get, I think, like 2% of funding. Women get 1% of funding. The money that makes it to the ground is 1/4 of that money. So even if funding is given towards that direction, it doesn't make it to the ground. So we need systems and mechanisms in order to make this funding arrive. And that's why the youth are strongly advocating for a loss and damage financing facility that also has to have a food and agriculture perspective. Especially for youth, Aisha and I have both been put in endless panels to fundraise for other people, to fundraise for adults who have their own foundations and things. And we never see, or seldom see, that money. We got a lot of actually support to come, for example, for COP, but it's always very short-term specific. It has to be longer, and it has to be no strings attached, in the sense that how can you give us money to a youth fund, and how can we distribute it, and how can you trust us that we will do nothing else with our lives but to save the planet? So that's the trust that needs to be put onto us. We will not stop doing this work, and we have no other interest but to make sure that this planet is livable for my children, and that my children can taste avocado, and my children can taste chocolate and coffee, and that's what I want. And so when we talk about finance, it has to be done in a way in which youth decide how that money is spent. But that is not to say that we have the capabilities to receive that money. That is not to say that we have the knowledge on how to, like report that money to taxes, and like we don't have that, we're not financially literate in that way yet. And a lot of us are, I'm talking about myself. But support also looks like helping organizations be able to receive that money, to expand the amount of money we can receive, to infrastructure building. So those are my comments on youth and funding.
Thank you so much, Shia. And we mentioned at the beginning of this that youth need that access to mentorship and financial and banking services and education. Those things are very important. So Aisha, would you like to comment as well?
So the youth collectively, we've been able to do a great deal with crumbs. And I know that the noise coming from that side is a little annoying, but I'm going to take responsibility for that as well, because this is the first time we actually have a youth pavilion, and it is so energetic, it is so lively, it is so colorful, and we were able to do that also with very little support. Now imagine what we could do with actual financial and advice and mechanisms that will allow to go us further. Collectively, we've changed the culture of planet Earth as we know it. Because of our strikes, now there's official youth envoy to the COP president. Because of our pushing, there's official youth constituency at this conference. Because of what we've been doing, academia has changed, and universities, Ivy Leagues are teaching about the things that we are developing as we are learning. So we've created not only culture, but at the UN level, but also academia, but also research. People are doing PhDs about the things that we are doing right now. That is valueless. I mean, not valueless, that is beyond the money that is actually being invested in us. And those of us that are here had to fight really, really hard to be here. I'm Pakistani, and there were so many tribal and also rural communities with internally displaced youth who deserve to be here. But when you are internally displaced in a community like mine, and when there is natural disaster, your paperwork disappears. You don't have a passport, you don't have a birth certificate, you cannot get an official letter to come to the conference of parties. And there is actually so many voices that deserve to be here that are not here. But on a more practical level, in order for us to really save the planet, because that is what is at stake, and I think we need to acknowledge that. We have to go much more beyond the people who are destroying it. Because at the moment, there is a great deal more energy, more money, more lawyers, more X, Y, Z being pushed into the direction of destroying the earth than protecting the earth. And isn't that so unfortunate? And so we need to arm ourselves with that much more in terms of those resources, but also as far as policy is concerned, as far as you guys are concerned. You've been doing this work for years. We want to receive that knowledge. We're eager to receive that knowledge. We want to learn from you and build upon what you've done to reach for the stars. So even if we fall on Earth, at least we've done that much.
So much. That was amazing. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it is true. It's up to all of us who are older in this room and in rooms outside of this conversation to make sure that we are working with youth, that they are part of the conversations that we are building, that they can, receive some of the knowledge that we have received, so that it can be passed on. So thank you so much for bringing up that point. Before I open up for questions, which I think is really important with this crowd and what's going on next door, which I can see from here, which is so great. So thank you for putting that together. One of the things that we've sort of discussed already is that we need more diversity in agriculture. We need to protect the indigenous and traditional crops that have nourished communities for millennia. But we also need a more diverse group of farmers and people who are involved in agriculture and food systems, not just as food producers, but as funders and investors, as advocates and others. So Roy, how, I'm wondering how the Rockefeller Foundation looks at creating helping, promote that diversity in agriculture that includes people and culture and all of the other things that make agriculture so fascinating to all of us.
Yeah, it's a fundamental principle. The more diversity you have, the more resilient, the more productive, et cetera. And I think that's true with people. One of the ways we've tried to address that is by supporting various food system fellows, finding young leaders, bringing them as a cohort, accompanying them over multiple years. Just bringing people together for one time is not very helpful. It is actually really important to create a network and support them over time. And those people become extraordinary leaders that support each other. And we have lots of examples of that. It was interesting when I was listening to Aisha and Shia, this combination of both respecting the past, learning from indigenous ways, but also innovating for the future. We need both of those two things. And it makes me think that, so much of in the world, we've been looking with the eye of separateness, and we need to start looking with the eye of unity, of oneness, of interconnectedness. And that's the thing that's really been missing. We're not very good at system thinking, of understanding our connectedness. And when we do that, we'll recognize that it isn't win-lose. It is actually win-win, but we're so stuck in really materialistic, old ways of thinking where we actually think we're separate. And that is not truth. That's not true. And I think young people are in a position to be able to view it in a different way and aren't as calcified, as I say, in ways of thinking. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Shia?
Yeah, I wanted to share something from this morning, actually. I was at a roundtable with the Columbia University Business School, and there were around 20 to 30 business leaders and university leaders. The dean of Harvard Business School and Columbia Business School were there, and a lot of investment funds and stuff like that. And it was great because it was a roundtable. So I'm also thinking, and that's how we operate in our communities. I'm thinking, what would it look like for us to be in a round table? And that's why I'm excited for questions, because all of us have to be thinking of this together. And what happened this morning was that I was saying how usually what happens is that youth are brought in to talk to companies or business leaders or politicians one time. We get 1 hour, 30 minutes to 1 hour to make an impression, to inspire somebody, to maybe shift the way they look at one policy. But that is not something that is sustained. So, for example, the Secretary General is the first time he ever has a youth advisory group. So every single thing that comes out of the mouth of the Secretary General that he's one of our greatest allies is because of the influence of youth. So think of how the world would look like if we had more youth advisors that are long-term. I love the fellowships. I think that's a really great way of making people connect. And it has to be replicated everywhere. How can there be, not just one token youth, but a group of youth that can support each other and be in community to always strive for something better, something that is imagined, and we can draw from experience. And one guy came up to me at the end and he said, give me 15 names. I'm ready to bring in the 15 most powerful funders that I know, and you can have an advisory group for all of them. And that's how fast we need to operate. If you get inspired right now, what is the next thing that I can do to make things happen? What strings can I pull to make things happen? And we are not going to accept any other slower way of operating because our futures are being negotiated right now. And all of us here are more or less on the same wavelength, but nothing is going to happen if we don't use our power to bring people together and mobilize.
Urgency is too great, for sure. We really need to make that change now. Khushbu. And then I'm going to end with Aisha.
So to add to what she has said, she's right. Like we need to build our forces together as youth, and in fact, I would say it was a lesson for us. I'm telling from own experience in Mauritius, because the first time we went to the representative of the Ministry of Agro-Industry, so he said to me, "What are your numbers? How many youth are you? So do you think you will be able to create that impact?" That was a challenge at that day. And till now, we have continued like building on the young farmers in Mauritius. We are building young farmers branches in other islands under the Republic of Mauritius. And I would say that the ministry is regarding us as a competition, but in a positive way, because he is introducing schemes that are in favor of, I would say, young farmers. So I'm glad that we as youth, although maybe not in partners yet, but we are triggering that change, that platform. For us, it's a win situation. So I completely agree with you that we all youth should stand in solidarity with each other, should support each other in this movement of like addressing crisis, be it climate, in the food crisis, in agriculture. All this would be possible with solidarity, unity of the young farmers in this context.
Thank you, Khushbu. Aisha.
I'm going to end with an anecdote because I think we have an abundance of finance. I think we have an abundance of meetings and panels. What we're lacking in, I think, is love for planet Earth. And we need more love for planet Earth than ever before. We need more love for her guardians than ever before. And if we really, really were serious about protecting our home, our planet, our children, we would do everything possible, everything possible. CGIAR taught me this, and I take it with me to every panel that I'm going to. Each one of you in this room will love somebody in the year 2100. And your children or your family's children, somebody that is related to you will be alive in that year. What are you doing to ensure that they have access to a dignified life and a livable planet and clean air and clean water? And I challenge you to take that question with you in every space, because the NDCs, the numerics that we're talking about in the years 2050, in the year 2075, etc., they're too late. You cannot negotiate with nature. You cannot compromise with the climate crisis. It will win if we don't do everything possible and come together as one. Because if there's one lesson this crisis is teaching us, it doesn't matter if you're in the global south, it doesn't matter if you're all the way in the Arctic, eventually the fire will reach your door as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. I love that we ended on love and action. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to open it up to questions. Please, we're going to bring you a mic. Just wait 1 second for the live stream.
All right. Thank you so much. I mean, this was, I was standing and I had to just come and sit down and listen very carefully. My name is Balki Salaudin. I'm a co-founder at Green Republic Farms. I'm a social and climate activist. I've been in the activism space for 6 years, and I only started farming last year. And one of the things that actually drove me into the farming system was I realized that a lot of us, we go out there, we agitate, we advocate, but we don't really take so much in-house action, right? And I realized that food system is one of the key things that we need to advocate for. And that is what we're doing at Green Republic Farms. I am a farmer, as I'm seated here. I have my farm produce in the market. I have farmers that are working with me in Nigeria. And one of the things that we've faced over time is costing, finances, right? We've not actually applied for any grant before, but we have spent millions of naira at the farm. And this is because at every point in time, we're seeing changes in prices. When we started at the farm, we started with 3 acres of land just by the stream side, and we had to recruit women to go to the stream and fetch water for us to use. So we didn't start with the irrigation system. And we realized that as the farm was expanding, there is an urgent need for us to bring in irrigation system. Irrigation system is very, very expensive because now we had to bring in the mulching film. Now we started this and we had to drill borehole. So we don't use the stream because when it's raining, the water is bad, so you can't use it. So we had to drill different boreholes and all of that. So that is like a lot of cost for us. And when we started our first set of harvest in earlier this year, we realized that all of the money that we made were actually going back into the business, right? And it was also going back into ensuring that we're using more technology to advance our work. Training of our staff, education, as you guys mentioned, is very important. So my question now is, for Rockefeller Foundation, for your organization in the water space, and for your organization probably in the civil society space, we're not, as I said, we're not asking for money. But how do you make these things affordable, especially for us that are practicing in real time? How do we make all of these instruments, this technology we keep talking about? Sometimes you see applications, they ask you your innovative ideas, your this, that, too technical for local farmers.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to get to Mark so he can answer the question so other people can ask questions.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Mark, do you want to take this on? Thank you.
Mark? Yeah? Okay. No, thank you for telling your story and your experience. In my institute, we work with a whole range of partners on an approach we call farmer-led irrigation, which is a bottom-up process. And one of the key barriers to that is indeed, just as you've outlined, how do you mobilize, how do you get the investment that you need to invest, to have the funds to build the irrigation system, even if it's small scale. And so the approach is to, alongside working with the irrigation equipment and the education and the capacity building, alongside that to look at, well, how do we build the market linkages, both in terms of the equipment and how you supply it, but also making sure that the produce is going to be linked into markets so that you can earn the income to pay the capital costs. So, and then in addition, alongside that is working with the financing institutions and say, well, how do you approach the credit worthiness process for young people, for women, for marginalized groups? How do you structure that in a way that's going to work for them and work for the challenges that they have in their livelihoods and in their communities? And trying to get the pieces of the puzzle lined up so that the pathway for stories such as that you have just told, the pathway has less friction in it, and it's easier to progress. So.
Thank you both so much. There's a question here in the back, Bernie. You in the blue shirt, yes.
Hello. Thank you so much for the very, very inspiring speeches. I love them. My name is Hasib. I'm from Afghanistan, but I'm coming from Germany here. I work with Climate Focus. I work on food systems. I love the energy and the advocacy and the work that the youth are doing. But I also think that for the youth and for all of us to make change, we need to become part of the policy-making process, right? At the end of the day, the government makes a decision based on the priorities they have, based on the policies that they put in place, and that policy drives government action. So my question is, and this comes from research because we know that the youth, the indigenous people, local communities, they are not part of policy-making process in the way that we all hope. So my question is, what your respective initiatives and organizations, be it Rockefeller Foundation or others, doing to make the process of policymaking inclusive, including for youth? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Arnold and Khushbu, I'm wondering if you can address that. How do you get policymakers on board with this and understanding that youth need to be at every table?
I don't know. Oh, it's okay. It's fundamental that the community will be engaged and will take the means to decide what they want. And the rural community are not enough engaged. I know that, and we need to build something together. We want that the market change. We want to be more sustainable, but locally, what are we doing? We can't wait from the government only. We have our responsibility. And me, as World Farmers Organization, my responsibility is to give leader, to give the occasion to the youth to discuss together and to find the solution and to focus on. In one country, I am sure we can implement what we have do or what some other youth organization have done in another place. But it's the first thing to be organized at the local level, and the other thing, it's everybody, we need that the market show what he wants. It's the buyer. It's the buyer who will make change in the business. And the labeling on the long chain is an obligation. For the short chain, we are there, and we met the consumer in theory. We are able to give the message that we move.
Khushbu, I want to give you a chance to talk about the policy-making aspect of this and what you hope WFO does. We have to keep it short. Everyone can mingle afterwards and ask you more questions.
Yes. To add to what the president said, so yes, the World Farmers Organization provide that opportunity, but you mentioned it right, that we as youth need to be included in the policy-making aspect. And in fact, through the World Farmers Organization, we get the opportunity to meet government representatives through various discussion panels. So that is a strategy for us as young farmers to meet with, I would say, the government, or you can say policymakers. So this is one opportunity that the World Farmers Organization provide us with. And I would say also from my experience, like we also do a lot of projects. Although the government is like not part of it, we make sure that through media, press, or we try to engage other ministers, not only from the Ministry of Agriculture, just to make sure that the concerned minister know what we are doing. So directly or indirectly, we are like in the same line or in the same process as with a policymaker. So this is one of the strategy, and I know we are short in time, but just to add up to what she said earlier, you know, in our country to get the funding, so what we do is we make our problem in form of a project, and then this project we go to a specific institution called incubators. I don't know if you have it like in your country. So those incubators will help you to write projects that would allow allow the influx of funding to come. Maybe this is one strategy. You can write your business plan to apply for funding from banking institution as well. So these are strategies that are working for us. Maybe you can try in your country. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Khushbu. I'm sorry we've run out of time. I want to give a round of applause to these panelists, please. I also want to remind you that Food Tank wants to thank the organizers, but we will also be publishing an article about this event on foodtank.com where you can find more information and learn about what we have done writing about youth as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.